How to name your game so it attracts a player's attention, a 3-step guide. How's it going? My name is Dariusz, and here's 5 advantages you'll get after reading this article or watching this video. So number 1 is, why do video games with bad names sell less copies? Number 2 is, what does a great name look like and why does it help you improve, game sales? 3 is, how does a game name grab a player's attention? 4 is, why picking out a good name is the best way to brand your video game for free. And 5 is a 3-step technique showing you how to name your video game in a way that instantly attracts a gamer's attention. All right, here's what you need to know. So the very first thing a new player will see is the name of your game. And you only have one first impression. You only have a few moments, to grab their attention. So if you're a small game dev company, having a good name is one of the best free marketing strategies you can use to grab attention. Now, I'm not saying that a game name is the only reason a game will fail or succeed, right? There are examples of games that have bad names and still do a good job. But what I'm saying is you should take any advantage you can when trying to market your game and increase sales, right? So let's learn how having a good name will help you grab attention and improve game sales. So first, what makes a bad video game name? So let me show you what makes a bad name and why it'll hurt your chances of grabbing attention and even hurt your chances of a high game sales. Then I'll show you how to find a good game name that is attention grabbing. Okay, have a look at these 2 lists of game names. So list number 1 is Grand Theft Auto, Vampire Survivors, Counter-Strike, Day by Daylight, Total War, Street Fighter. Now compare those names with this list, which is Path to Gia, Chronicles of Amira, Spherical Alliance, Corrupt, Astrodition, Carroting Brain, and Renova. So the first list contains some of the top selling games of all time, and the second list contains games that have been released and have low game sales according to gamestats.com. So what's the difference between these 2 lists? And does a bad name really lead to low game sales? Well, let's do a thought experiment. Can you picture yourself in your mind, a vampire survivor? Can you picture in your mind, a street fighter? Can you see somebody, committing Grand Theft Auto? And when I say, Dead by Daylight, do you know what will happen when daylight hits, right? So now let me ask you this. What is a corrupt? Can you picture a corrupt? And what about hyperventilia? Can you picture it, whatever it is? Or who or what is Renova, right? So let me break down the differences here. So the first list of names are actionable. You can, imagine them in your mind. They're kind of concrete in your mind, right? So more specifically, in the first list, the names tell you what you're going to do in the game. So like fight in the streets, or you're going to have an all-out war, or you'll need to counter-strike, right? Or you're going to have to, survive vampires and monsters, and you get to commit, Grand Theft Auto, right? In the second list, all these names are abstract. I can't imagine in my mind any of these things, right, on what I'm going to do. In other words, they're not telling me anything what I'm about to do in the game, right? Can I astrodition anything? Is even carroting a word? What's a spherical alliance, right? The first list is specific, concrete, and the second list is abstract. So why does having an abstract name hurt game sales? Well, being abstract doesn't grab attention. That's because when a player has to, mentally work and, connect the dots and try to figure out what an abstract name means, then you've lost their interest, right? So remember, your player isn't going to give you their full attention and spend a few minutes, trying to figure out what corrupt means. So for example, say you've never heard of, Minecraft, right? When you hear that, say you heard that for the first time, Minecraft, your brain doesn't have to, mentally work, doesn't have to, connect the dots to get to, to understand what you get to do, right? Right away, that you get to mine and you craft, right? But say you heard the name hyperventilia, it's hard for your brain to, connect the dots and you know what the point of the game is. So my whole point here is that the first list of game names gets right to the point, and the second list never gets to the point ever, right? And again, I'm not saying that the name is the only reason for good and bad sales, right? There are names like Valheim and Baldur's Gate that are very abstract, but usually these studios have paid a lot for branding and have a lot of marketing momentum behind them. But if you don't have that money for branding and marketing, then like this, like those games do, then your best strategy is to have a specific but distinct name that shows a player what you get to do. So let me get more into depth on why a good game name grabs more attention. And then later you'll get an action plan to help you come up with a name that grabs the gamer's attention. And then you'll learn how to leverage your name in a way so it's, basically free branding and free marketing. So let's keep going. Does a good video game name really influence sales? Okay, so remember, the ultimate goal here is to develop a game that, basically sells itself and getting lots of game sales and that people are having fun playing your game, right? And any advantage you can get to grab a player's attention so that they are, actually play your game and buy it, you need to take it, okay? So having the right name is one of those advantages. So think about it this way. A gamer doesn't know about you yet. The first thing a gamer will hear about you is the name of your game. And your game name is the first introduction to you and your video game, basically, right? So you only have one chance, to get a good first impression. And what is a good first impression? Well, here's 3 elements that make up a good game name so that you get a good first impression, basically. So number 1 is it has to be specific, tangible, and concrete. Number 2 is distinctive, so words that have more emotional meaning, right? And number 3 is it's jam-packed with benefits. And number 4 is it's hard to forget and easy to remember. Okay, this is great and all, but how can you use this in your own game name, right? How do you take all these, 4 elements and use them to help come up with a good game name that grabs the player's attention so that, they eventually buy your game, right? So let me explain what are benefits and how do, benefits help sell video games. So a benefit is something a gamer will get to do or experience, right? And don't confuse, benefits with features. Features are the thing, right? And a benefit is what you get to do and experience with that thing. So for example, let's look at the name Minecraft. The name is loaded with benefits, basically. So you have 2 words, mine and craft. They get to do those 2 things, right? And you can picture them in your mind doing those 2 actions. Also, the word craft has an association tied to gamers, right? So most players probably heard of, StarCraft and World of Warcraft, and seeing that name in Minecraft for the first time would grab, attention, right? But you got to be careful because once a game dev discovers a word that is loaded with benefits, others use it too in their name, right? So, and then the opposite happens. That word that was once jam-packed with benefits gets oversaturated, and a lot of games have that word in it, and like words like craft no longer have the benefits associated with it. So look at the word tower, or even today survivors. You'll see those words used in names a lot because that's popular, right? But it's going to be oversaturated. And what will happen to those words will happen to craft, right? It'll be oversaturated. So this is what I mean by having a name that is distinctive, right? So in 2011, using craft in your name was distinctive, but today, not so much. And like I said, I see this happening again too with, the word survivors or, tower, right? In 2023, as I write this and record this, having survivors in your name, your game name, seems like a smart thing to do, but then you're going to be competing with, almost 3,000 games with that name in it. So it's not distinctive anymore, right? So let me show you some more examples, right? So look at the word or the game Grand Theft Auto. Again, the name is loaded with benefits. In less than a second, a gamer knows exactly what they get to do in the game, right? So imagine if Rockstar named Grand Theft Auto, something, like City Criminal. City Criminal is too abstract and it's not distinctive, but Grand Theft Auto is more specific and descriptive. And again, what I mean by descriptive is has more emotional value. So Grand Theft Auto has more emotional value than, City Criminal. So let me show you some more examples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to list a bunch of good game names. And then I'm going to use a thought experiment. I'm going to, try my best to pretend I've never heard of these game names before. And I'll write down the first thing that comes to mind. So here's the list. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. My first thought was they could have used boxing in the word, but Punch-Out is more distinctive and more emotional than boxing, right? So Call of Duty, you're called into duty, right? Literally called into duty. Assassin's Creed, a game about honor among thieves, but you're an assassin, right? New World, you get to explore literally a new world. And then Mountain Blade, you're riding horses and fighting wars. Tomb Raider, literally raiding tombs, right? It's pretty simple, right? Guitar Hero, you get to be a rock star. Resident Evil, you get to experience a haunted house. Uncharted, chart what is not charted, right? Journey, game about the journey and not the destination. A Battlefield, you get to fight in a big battle, basically, right? Euro Truck Simulator, what it's like to, truck across Europe. A Farming Simulator, what it's like to farm. Goat Simulator, what it's like to goat. I don't know. Anyway, Prison Architect, you get to design and manage a prison. Anyway, I can go on. And my point here is by just looking at the name alone, it's easy to describe what you get to do. I can quickly look at those names, and in my mind, I can imagine doing those things, right? But with an abstract game name, my brain can't come up with anything, right? That's why I say it's very important to be specific and not abstract, because you'll get more attention by being very specific. And I'm not saying don't use an abstract name, but I am saying that if you're starting off as a game developer company or game company, you're going to have to pay a lot in branding so people, associate meaning to your abstract name, right? Anyway, my goal here is to help you come up with a game name that your player can easily deduce what your game is about and what they get to do and, basically what's in it for them. If your game name is abstract, then your player will have a hard time figuring out what they get to do and what's in it for them. And they don't have the time to figure it out, right? And yeah, I know I'm cherry picking, these names. There's a lot of names that are abstract and sell a lot of copies. For example, Myst, Elder Scrolls, DayZ, Diablo, even Cyberpunk 2020 or 2077, Witcher, Dark Souls, But if you're a small game dev studio and you can't afford to pump millions into branding, then going with a literal name will give you a marketing advantage. And what kind of marketing advantage? Well, having basically a literal name is an advantage because it's a lot easier to get a gamer's attention. Again, that's because a player doesn't have to mentally work for its meaning. Also, a literal name tells the player right away what's in it for them. And also having a literal game name is free branding, and having a literal name that is distinct, so remember, has emotional value, is hard to forget. And that's the goal of branding, basically, so people remember your name, right? But on the flip side, abstract names are hard to market because they are hard to remember, and you need a lot of branding to get your gamer to remember that name, right? So what do? How do you come up with a literal name that is distinctive, highly emotional, and it's not boring? And how do you come up with a name that's, jam-packed with benefits and easy to remember? All right, let's move on to how to name your game so it instantly grabs a player's attention, a 3-step guide. So a good name is specific, concrete, distinctive, and jam-packed with benefits, right? And a good name doesn't make the player think too hard. And a good name is easy to remember. And that a bad name is too abstract. And if the name is too abstract, then the player has to think too much, right? And players, they usually won't spend that much time trying to figure it out, right? And abstract names are hard to remember. So let me walk you through on how to come up with a good name for your game. So step 1 is open a Google Doc and list 10 actions or verbs that you get to do in your game, right? So as you probably know a verb refers to a literal action like running, shooting, hiding, talking, exploring, climbing, avoiding, all that stuff, right? So for example, here are some of the key actions or verbs that you can do in Tomb Raider, right? So I went through Tomb Raider and I came up with, verbs or actions. So you're exploring, platforming, solving puzzles, combat, swimming and diving, collecting artifacts, interacting with NPCs, inventory management, climbing and rappelling, and stealth, right? So come up with these 10 actions or 10 verbs if you can, right? And then rank them in order in terms of the main action your player will do. So in my example, I ranked them, with exploring, platforming, and solving puzzles because those are the main key actions the player gets to do in Tomb Raider, right? So the reason you're doing this is to find the benefits that you can, jam pack into your game name. Okay, so here's step number 2. And that is write down 5 to 8 settings where these actions take place. So once you have these 3 actions, or verbs, connect them to your world setting, right? So in Tomb Raider, my Tomb Raider example, I came up with ancient tombs and ruins, exotic landscapes, cities and urban areas, islands, underwater environments, Arctic and snowy regions, mystical and mythological settings, and real world locations. So take step number 1 and combine it with step number 2. So here's what I came up with. Ancient Tomb Explorer, basically Tomb Explorer, Island Puzzler, Exotic Puzzle Platformer, Exotic Ruins Explorer, Tomb Jumper. Okay, the idea here is not to be perfect right now, and you're just brainstorming, you're building a scaffolding. And I know these are horrible names right now, but this is how you're building up to a good name, right? And it's not going to happen in 2 minutes. You're not going to come up with a good name in 2 minutes. And sometimes it takes weeks to come up with a good name, right? So this is just a starting point. So in step 3, we're going to tie it all together. So let's move on to step 3, and that is get more specific and make the name distinctive. So yes, I know Tomb Explorer or Tomb Jumper is literal, concrete, and specific, but it's not distinctive, right? It sounds boring, it's flat, it basically doesn't sound exciting like Tomb Raider does, right? So to make it more distinct and more exciting and more emotional, let's drill down and get even more specific. So look at your list of 10 verbs and see if you can get even more specific with those verbs, right? So remember, you want to uncover something more emotional than just boring action, right? So in my example, my first verb or action was explore, but explore is too abstract and explore isn't emotional enough, right? It's flat. But Raider is way more emotional than Explorer. That's because Raider is more specific than Explorer, right? It's hard to imagine Explorer. There's a lot of different types of Explorers. You can, explore seas, sky, and even explore thoughts, right? Explore is not concrete enough, but it's a lot easier to imagine Raider, right? Yes, they explore, but they also are explorers who enter, places illegally or in areas that are forbidden. They also attack and fight. A general explorer doesn't do all that, right? But a raider does, right? So by combining player actions with your setting, you can come up with more specific names that are distinct, emotional, and are more exciting to a player. So for example, say I was making a explorer platformer puzzle game in an exotic location, I would name my game, Lost Relics or Lost Relic Hunter or just Relic Hunter, Relic Seeker, Relic Thief, Forgotten Relics, Forgotten Forest, Deep Temples, or Old Gods, something with more emotional value than, Tomb Explorer, what I came up earlier, right? And this is why names like Dwarf Fortress they sound simple, but if you think about it, it's hard to come up with something simple. It's almost like a pop song, right? You look at the pop songs, they sound simple, but it's really hard to write a pop song, right? It's the same with a good game name. All of those examples I've showed you sound really simple, like Dwarf Fortress sounds simple, but it's really hard to come up with something that's very simple and has emotional value, and it's easy to remember. So this is what I'm trying to show you how to do in these 3 steps. And I know it's not easy to come up with a good name that, grabs attention. And if you went through the 3 steps that I showed you, and you're still finding you're coming up with, abstract or boring names that aren't attention grabbing, then here's what to do. Click the link in the description below, and I'll help you with more in-depth, advanced free techniques. Okay, let's keep going. So what to do right now? Here's your action plan. So the best way to learn something is to take action right away when you learn it, right? And you only understand something when you experience it and not, just read about it. So do this right now. Open that Google Doc and write down 3 actions and verbs your player gets to do in your game. And I know I said, 10 in my 3-step action plan, but right now you're just doing a warm up. Do 3, verbs and actions that your player gets to do. So knowing your 3 actions or 3 verbs will help you come up with a name that is loaded with benefits. Then write down your main setting and see how you can combine, your setting with those verbs and those actions, right? So for example, Tomb Raider, the action is raid, the setting is tomb. So Football Manager, action is manage, and setting is, football stadium or game, right? Grand Theft Auto action is auto and theft, and the setting is, a big city. My point here is that all of these names signify what you get to do in the game, and you get to do it in a unique setting, right? And these names are not sexy. They're not very clever, they're not flashy, but they are also hard to forget, right? And they're also easy to remember. And remember, the closer you get to being literal and specific, and then tie it into your setting, the closer you are to coming up with a name that is hard to forget. And having an abstract name means you'll need to spend a lot of money on branding to help gamers remember you, right? And remember that name. But a literal name does that all for you, right? It does the branding and marketing for you for free. And a literal name shows the player, the gamer, what they get to do, and that gets a gamer's attention, and it's easy to remember and hard to forget. And remember, a gamer will only probably give you 3 seconds, right? So you need to grab their attention as fast as you can by being specific and tangible. So here's your next step. So coming up with a unique, specific name that's jam-packed with benefits isn't easy, right? And it's not easy to come up with a distinctive name that's emotional and that's also attention grabbing, right? So if you're still stuck and you need help, then I invite you to take advantage of my free workshop. So like I said before, click the link in the description below, and I'll help you come up with a game name that will grab a player's attention. Again, my name is Dariusz. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Good luck with your game dev journey. All right, bye.